Hi there, my name is Iris and I am one of the technicians here at Modern Domestic. We are Bernina certified technicians and we do service all brands. So today I'm going to go over some troubleshooting on a top loading system, this Genome computerized machine, and also a front loading Bobbin system, one of our Berninas here. The first thing you want to do when you're experiencing jamming or tension issues is you're going to want to remove the thread and the needle from your machine and put a new needle in and rethread. So the biggest oversight that I see repeatedly is when we start rethreading our machines, sometimes that autopilot just kicks in and we forget to thread our machine with the presser foot lifted. And this is a really important aspect of threading, just because when your presser foot is lifted like this, there are tension discs that are inside of your machine. Usually they're up here. When your presser foot is lifted, those tension discs separate so that your thread can easily pass between them. When you lower your presser foot, those tension discs come back together and they provide that upper tension that we talk about. If you accidentally thread your machine with your presser foot down, then your thread will just kind of sit on the top of those discs rather than in between them. You won't have that tension on your top thread. You're gonna end up with tension issues. So at that point, stop what you're doing, lift your presser foot, take your needle out, rethread your machine, put your needle back in, kind of just start from square one. So I'm gonna go over that process now if you have a more severe jam or thread issue. Here are some basic tools that you will want to have on hand when you begin troubleshooting with your machine. Small pair of scissors or thread snips, pair of tweezers, new needles, brush of some kind to remove lint and dust. Either one of these styles works. And you're gonna want a screwdriver. For some machines, the screwdrivers look different. There's little kind of stubby ones. Some machines require a screwdriver to remove the screws that hold the stitch plate onto the machine. And some machines like this Bernina here do not. They just have a portion of the stitch plate that you press down and it pops right off. That may vary with your specific machine. A lot of people ask about canned air, and I generally suggest not using that because it can actually blow dust and lint and thread into your machine and exacerbate your problem. Once those tools are with you, you want to start by removing all the parts of your machine that sew. So you want to take the free arm cover off so you have a little more room to work. Use your scissors and go up to the top of your machine and you want to cut your thread up here. The reason for that is you don't want to be pulling your thread back through your machine because there are angled springs inside of your machine that can catch the thread and potentially get the thread stuck inside of your machine. So always cut it from up here and then pull the thread out from down by your needle. The next step is you're going to want to remove your sewing needle, and you can discard that if you've had a jam or something, just because like I said before, there could be a burr or the needle could be bent slightly and it's sometimes very hard to see. The next step is you want to release this bobbin cover, move it to the side and remove your bobbin from your bobbin area. Go ahead and remove your presser foot. And this just allows you to have more visibility and a little more room while you're troubleshooting. This next step, you want to go ahead and remove your stitch plate next. And you just pull this off that way. Now, as you can see, we've got a really good visual on your bobbin area. You can look in here and make sure that nothing's stuck. With this machine, we're lucky because the bobbin case just pulls right out. And a lot of machines, that is the case, and some are not. So if yours is more difficult to remove, just connect with us or another technician about taking that step. See really clearly the bobbin area. We can rotate the flywheel or hand wheel in the direction of sewing, which is towards you. And you can see during this step, if there is thread that's stuck anywhere or if there's large pieces of lint, usually they come out in this process and they become visible. So you can, take your tweezers and you can kind of like pull them out, or your brush is handy. You can get in there and kind of clean out some of the lint or things that you see. All service manuals, it should tell you where to oil your machine. However, if this is your first time seeing it, there's a small sort of gutter right here along the inside of your hook. Go ahead and just put 1 or 2 drops of oil. I just put a tiny little drop in there. There's a little nub right here on the bobbin case, and that corresponds to this very small spring right here. So when you're setting your bobbin case in here, it may take just a little bit of figuring, but you want it to just sit right in there nice and evenly. That's actually where the thread passes through when it's creating the stitch under the machine. So you want that to be, you know, somewhat free. At this point, you can go ahead and turn that flywheel or hand wheel towards you one more time in the sewing position. If that feels really smooth, then you are set to put your machine back together. So now we're going to put the stitch plate back on. Just set that on there. Take your screw and get that back in there. You don't need to over tighten, just tighten it to, you know, just so it's snug. Put your presser foot back on. You can take your bobbin and set it back in. So at this point, you can return to your top thread, holding the thread with your right hand just as something to sort of pull against. Rethread your machine, making sure, again, that your presser foot is lifted. Insert a new needle, and just having a fresh needle is gonna really help. So once you're here, you can actually drop your presser foot so that you have a little bit of stability with your thread. You can lift your presser foot here again. I've threaded my needle and I'm going to bring up the bobbin thread through the stitch plate. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to keep some constant sort of pressure or by pulling slight upper thread here. Rotate the flywheel or hand wheel one complete rotation towards me. When you're rotating your needle down into the stitch plate and back up and it's one complete rotation, the thread take-up lever is going to drop down into your machine and come back up. And I'm going to dip the needle all the way down under the stitch plate, pull the needle all the way back up, and you know that it's completed one full rotation when that needle comes back up and then slightly starts to go down again. And when you see that thread take-up lever emerge from the top of your machine once again. Go ahead and pull that out. And right here, you can pull the thread out about 6 inches. Just make sure that feels really nice and smooth. You can go ahead and put your bobbin cover back on, clip your threads, and now you're ready to start sewing again. Information that I go over here will be applicable to most front-loading bobbin system machine. Begin by lifting the presser foot and snipping with our scissors or our thread snips. So once your thread is out of your machine, you can go ahead and remove your needle. You can remove your presser foot. Bernina machines, you just lift this tab in the back and pull the foot off. Just press on the stitch plate and it pops right off, so you just remove that. Here, open the bobbin door, and by pulling this tab on the back of the bobbin case, we're going to remove the bobbin case with the bobbin. Have a tab right here to the left-hand side. On other machines, you might have 2 tabs on both sides. You want to push these tabs out of the way, and this releases this retainer. Remove your hook by grabbing this middle post and pulling the hook out. We've got a very clear visual here on the hook system and what may or may not be stuck in here. So you may have thread wrapped around, you know, this bar. At this point, you're gonna wanna use your tweezers and get in there, pull out pieces of thread you see. You can use your brush or your fluffy duster and you can get in there and you can clean out the area of any lint or dust. You know, in these crevices here, you might have something wrapped around your retainer. To turn the flywheel or hand wheel towards me in the direction of sewing so that we can make sure that there's not something else going on. If this is moving nice and smoothly, then you know that your machine is free of any jam or anything. So at this point, you're going to want to put 1 drop of oil right here in this gutter. That's where the hook sits, opposite to this crescent-shaped hook driver. It just sits right in here. And you're just gonna wanna put 1 drop of oil in there. And that's all you're gonna need. But like I said earlier, this is the hook. It's this kind of crescent-shaped piece of metal. This hook fits into the machine opposite of this kind of moon-shaped hook driver. And again, this is a standard feature for most front-loading machines. So you're gonna take your hook by this little post, you're gonna hold it like that, and you're gonna fit it in opposite of the driver. So it may take a second because, you know, it is in there. So just kind of mess with it until you get it in there nice and seamlessly. So as you can see here, this seam right here is nice and smooth. There's not a ridge. This isn't in there all wonky. It's just fitting in there nice and smooth opposite of this driver. At this point, you can pull your retainer back up. Make sure you firmly click it into place. Usually you're listening for a click. If there are the two little arms that you kind of pull inside, you would do this at this point to secure that retainer. When you put your bobbin back in, so what you want to do is hold your bobbin case in your hands like a cradle so that your bobbin doesn't fall out. And when you put this back in the machine, line up this little arm. There's a small indentation in your retainer that it matches with. So you're going to want to line that up, not using that pull tab, just holding it like this. Fit it on that post, line it up with that little indentation here at the top, and then push it straight in, and you'll hear a click. I'm just giving this thread a little bit of pulling here. Everything feels really nice and smooth. That feels good to me. One nice feature on these Bernina machines is you have a thread cutter integrated into the arm right here. So I can just use this and cut the thread like that. If you're gonna cut your thread with snips, you want about 3 inches of free thread. And then you can close your bobbin door and you're all set there. So now we're going to put our stitch plate back on our machine. If you've got a Bernina, you can just place it here and go ahead and click it back on. If you've got another machine that requires you use a screwdriver and tighten down those screws, and we're going to put in a new needle. So in this machine and others, you just place that there, make sure. And with this, you don't need to over tighten it. You don't need to get a screwdriver and really, you know, tighten it down. You can just make sure that it's in there. My stitch plate on, my needle in. I'm gonna go ahead and put my presser foot back on. The Berninas, you just put it on as a whole unit and pull this tab down. Our presser foot is back on our machine, our needle's back in, everything's ready to rethread. This is the part where it's very important to remember to have your presser foot lifted, as we went over in the beginning of the video. So make sure your presser foot is lifted for this threading part. Make sure that you're following the correct threading pathway. Be mindful of that. So now we've threaded the top of the machine, and there's an alternative way to pull the we're going to want to pull the bobbin thread up from underneath the stitch plate. A lot of computerized machines have a needle up-down function that's really convenient for this step. Just like where you'd hold it if you were going to turn the flywheel, you're going to want to press that needle up-down button, bring your needle down underneath the stitch plate, keep holding this thread here, press it again, and bring it back up. And as you'll notice, the bobbin thread popped up from underneath the stitch plate there. So I hope this has helped kind of demystify some of those aspects of troubleshooting while you're at home sewing and you run into a jam. If there are things that, you know, do come up that are a little bit more complicated, we do service all brands of machines. So if you guys do run into something that you have trouble with, we're happy to be a resource for you to get your machine healthy and back sewing again.